A rocket tears his arm off at the shoulder. He shoves the stump into his belt so it stops flopping around. Then he picks up a gun with the one hand he has left and goes back to work. This isn't a movie. This happened. January 8, 1968, a rice paddy in Vietnam. And by the time it was over, a 20-year-old kid from Wisconsin had done something so violent, so relentless, that the President of the United States would hang the Medal of Honor around his neck for it. Welcome back to the War Files. If this is your first time here, subscribe right now, because we tell the stories the history books skip, because next week we're covering the machine that finally replaced men like the one you're about to meet. A helicopter built to do what he was forced to do with his bare hands. Now let's get into it. Before we get to the blood and the rice paddy, you need to understand the job. Because what this man did only makes sense once you understand how insane his job already was, on a good day. When American helicopters first showed up in Vietnam, they weren't weapons. They were trucks with rotors. Fly troops in, fly troops out, beat the jungle by going over it instead of through it, no guns. No armor, just speed and altitude as protection. The Viet Cong figured out the flaw in that plan almost instantly. Helicopters follow patterns. They have to slow down to land. And a slow, low, unarmed aircraft dropping into a clearing is one of the easiest targets in the history of warfare. The enemy had Soviet-made 51 caliber machine guns that could shred an aircraft from half a mile out. They had RPGs that could kill a Huey with a single hit. And they had all the time in the world to wait in the tree line for the Americans to fly right into their sights. Nearly half of all U.S. helicopters sent to Vietnam would eventually go down. Enemy fire was one of the biggest reasons why. So crews did what soldiers have always done when the brass moves too slow. They fixed the problem themselves. Crew chiefs started bungee, cording machine guns to the ceiling, bracing them in open doorways, firing on approach, firing on takeoff, firing at anything that looked like a threat. It worked well enough that it stopped being an improvisation and became doctrine. But one gun could only cover one side of the aircraft, so they added a fourth man, a dedicated gunner in the open doorway, opposite the crew chief. That man had a nickname, the Shotgun Rider, his official title Door Gunner, and within a matter of months, he became one of the most hunted human beings in the entire war. Here's what almost nobody outside of Vietnam understood about this job. The pilots had a windshield. They had a thin sheet of armor bolted under their seats. Not much, but something. The door gunner had nothing. He sat in an open doorway, wind screaming past him, holding a machine gun, with absolutely no cover between his chest and the jungle below. Body armor existed, technically, but it was built to stop shrapnel, not rifle rounds, and it was so heavy and unbearable in 100-degree humidity that a lot of gunners just didn't wear it. There were ceramic chest plates too. Troops called them chicken plates. The nickname alone tells you how much faith anyone put in them. The enemy noticed fast that these open-door gunners were the ones actually killing them. So snipers started setting up specifically to hunt them. Take out the gunner, and the helicopter goes blind and unprotected in the most dangerous seconds of the mission, the landing. Door gunners had the highest casualty rate of any position in a helicopter crew. Full stop. And it wasn't just bullets. The aircraft itself could kill you. Pilots threw helicopters into violent evasive turns to dodge fire, and centrifugal force alone could rip an unsecured man straight out the door. Gunners wore something called a monkey harness, a strap bolted to the floor that stopped you from falling to your death. It didn't stop you from getting thrown out the door. It just meant your crew had to haul you back in by a rope while you dangled in open air over enemy territory, taking fire the entire time. And then there was the worst moment of every mission, the hot landing zone. The helicopter has to slow down, has to hover, has to sit there, nearly still, in open ground, while the enemy unloads everything they have. In that moment, the only thing standing between the infantry on board and a massacre was one man's finger on a trigger. Some gunners kept firing after they were hit. Some were found afterwards still gripping their weapons, having fought to their literal last breath. Because they knew the second they stopped shooting, everyone behind them died. Over 700 door gunners and crew chiefs were killed in Vietnam. One of the men who almost joined that number, but refused to, was a kid named Gary Wetzel. Gary Wetzel grew up one of 9 kids in a working-class house in South Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He wasn't the guy who excelled in school. He was the guy who idolized John Wayne, played sports, ran with the Boy Scouts. The kind of kid who wanted to prove something. He enlisted at 18 in 1965. First job in Vietnam Ordnance. Behind the scenes, away from the fight. That wasn't good enough for him. He enlisted while still in country just so he could switch assignments, and that's how he landed with the 173rd Assault Helicopter Company, a unit that called itself the Robin Hoods. By 1967, he was flying as a door gunner on a Huey. By January of 1968, he'd already been shot down 4 separate times and walked away from one of them with only minor wounds. His luck was about to run out completely. January 8, 1968, near a hamlet called Ap Dong An in the Mekong Delta. American infantry from the 9th Division was already fighting on the ground and needed reinforcements fast. The 173rd was scrambled to fly troops directly into the fight. It should have been routine, a standard insertion. It was an ambush. The enemy had positioned heavy machine guns and rocket launchers in the tree line and let the entire formation of helicopters commit to their landing before opening fire. There was no pulling out, no second option. The aircraft were already descending, already exposed, already trapped. Wetzel's helicopter took a direct rocket hit to the front of the aircraft. The cockpit was torn apart. The pilot, Warrant Officer Timothy Artman, was critically wounded, shot in the legs going into shock. The co-pilot's thumb was shattered by gunfire. The crew chief was riddled with shrapnel, and the helicopter slammed into the flooded rice paddy below. Wetzel moved forward to help the pilots. That's when 2 more rockets detonated inches from his body. The blast tore his left arm apart, leaving it connected by nothing but a strip of skin. Shrapnel ripped into his right arm, his chest, his leg. The explosion threw him clear of the wreckage and into the rice paddy, where by every reasonable expectation, a 20-year-old bleeding from 4 different wounds should have simply died in the mud. Instead, Gary Wetzel made a decision that still doesn't fully make sense outside of pure will. He grabbed the ruined remains of his own left arm, the one barely attached to his body, and tucked it into his belt so it would stop swinging and getting in his way. Then he spotted a Viet Cong soldier moving toward the downed helicopter with a grenade, closing in on the wounded crew. With one working arm, Wetzel drew his sidearm and shot the man dead. Then he got up. He ran back toward the wrecked helicopter, what he would later call, without a hint of self-pity, his John Wayne run. He took another round to the leg on the way, dropped to one knee, and forced himself back up. Somehow, and Wetzel himself says he can't fully explain how, he climbed back into his door gunner's position with one arm gone and got his M60 machine gun operating again. In that moment, his weapon was the only thing on the American side putting effective fire back onto the enemy. Everyone else was wounded, pinned, or scattered across open ground with nowhere to hide. He located the camouflaged machine gun position that was tearing his unit apart, and he did not stop firing until it went silent. Most men at that point would have stayed down. Wetzel had already done more than what any citation could reasonably demand of a human being with one arm and half his blood in the mud beneath him. He got up again. He left his gun to try to drag his critically wounded pilot to cover. He collapsed from blood loss before he could reach him. He woke up. He crawled forward again. He found the crew chief already trying to pull the pilot toward a small dirt embankment for cover, and Wetzel joined him, dragging his commander to safety before passing out a second time. The survivors were pinned in that rice paddy for up to 12 hours before help could safely land. Warrant Officer Artman died roughly 6 hours after the crash, before a medevac could reach him in time. When rescue finally got to Wetzel, he needed 18 units of blood just to keep his heart beating. Doctors amputated what remained of his left arm to stop the infection already spreading through it. On November 19, 1968, inside the White House, President Lyndon Johnson placed the Medal of Honor around Gary Wetzel's neck. He was 21 years old. Wetzel's stand, and the deaths of thousands of gunners like him, proved something the Army couldn't ignore anymore. Helicopters weren't just trucks. They could fight. But the Hugh was never designed for it. Every extra gun bolted on made it heavier, slower, thirstier for fuel, and no more able to take a hit than before. It took the introduction of a purpose-built attack helicopter, the H-1 Cobra, to finally give door gunners the backup they'd been bleeding for since the start of the war. It arrived in 1967. It came too late for the 700 men who never made it home. Gary Wetzel is in his late 70s now. He still lives in Wisconsin. He still shows up to honor other veterans. He has said more than once that he doesn't think of himself as a hero, just a soldier trying to keep his friends alive. But every time he puts that medal on, he says he thinks about the ones who didn't make it back. If this story hit you the way it hit us, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling us which part stuck with you the most. We read every single one. And if you want to see the machine that finally gave men like Gary Wetzel a fighting chance, our Cobra gunship video is on screen right now. Go watch it next. This has been the War Files. We'll see you in the next one.